And first off, I just want to thank the three panelists, Jesse, Felly, and Junior, for your time. It's awesome to have you here. This is the fourth panel we're doing, and it's been really awesome to see the student questions, and I'm glad to have all the students here. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for submitting the questions beforehand. Anytime during the meeting, you can feel free to throw a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand through Zoom and we'll call on you. And first, I'd like to start off with just giving each of the professionals an opportunity to introduce themselves and just give a quick little background. So Jesse, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to meet you. My name is Jesse. I grew up outside of New York City, and I actually went to college with Felly. We've known each other a very long time. My path to consulting was a bit untraditional. I was an urban studies major in college, and I was always very passionate about racial equity, and I focused mostly on public education, and I was a teacher for 2 years after graduating. It was during that time that I began to reflect more critically on my identities as a white person and a person with the privilege of my air quotes pedigree, because I went to this fancy school. And that's what, we decided to go into consulting, which might sound a little bit nonlinear, and it really isn't. But the idea was that I felt I was better suited to advocate for the things that I believed in a space where I had all these unearned advantages. I also, unfortunately, working in a public system, wasn't really getting a good sense for strategy development and execution, wasn't really working in a very effective organization, and wasn't really inspired by the leaders that I saw, which is what led me to Bain. And I'm happy to talk tactically about what applying to Bain specifically looks like. Felly and I also went to Wharton together. And then I went back to Bain after business school, frankly, because Bain offered to pay for it. And I thought that was a great opportunity. And then over the past year, I decided that I didn't want to be in consulting anymore, and I want to focus fully on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what I'm looking to do now.
Thank you, Jesse. Felly, do you want to go next?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. So nice to meet everyone. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Argentina. I lived in Buenos Aires until I was about 10 years old. And then my family moved to Iowa. So big change there. And that kind of drastic change really got me interested in finance, actually. I wanted to understand kind of what had happened, what had driven my family to kind of really drastically relocate. So like Jesse said, we went to college together, where I majored in finance and went into investment banking after school, and did that for 4 years, but realized it was not the career for me, and really went back to school again with Jesse, and wanted to go into consulting, in large part because there was two reasons that really drove me to consulting. One was I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And consulting obviously gives you a little bit of that optionality. And the other reason was, like Jesse, I really do think you get a really great skill set and a very unique skill set in consulting, and that really appealed to me. So I ended up going to McKinsey, where I was for past almost over 2.5 years. But actually recently, about 3 weeks ago, left McKinsey, and I'm now actually the director of strategy at Peloton. So I'm like this job a lot more, but it was really thankful. I have to be like 100% transparent that it was thanks to my job at McKinsey that I got this role. So very, 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 very thankful for that experience as well.
Thank you, Felly. And Junior?
Hey, nice to meet you all. So my name is Junior. I originally from Haiti. I moved to New York when I was 5 years old. I'm actually I was raised in Brooklyn, New York. Studied finance and investments undergrad, and also wanted to pursue a career in finance. And all just came from just trying to understand how money works, and being honest, just to be completely frank. One time a professor in high school asked me, like, what do I want to do? I was like, I don't know. He's like, what are you good at? I'm like, math. He's like, have you ever thought about working in finance and being an accountant? And to me, an accountant meant doing taxes. And I was like, I don't really want to work for like H&R Block and stuff. And then we went to the occupational handbook from the BLS website. He's like, no, you can work for like a major accounting firm or a bank, and here's how much money you can make. And I was like, I'm going to major in accounting. And that's how I got into finance. So I worked at Goldman after undergrad in a risk management position. And then I worked at Barclays in an internal strategy position, altogether for about 6-7 years. decided to go to business school after that to pursue a career in consulting because I had a lot of core finance and key technical skills. But in my position at Barclays in the internal strategy team, we worked a lot with former consultants, and just seeing the way they were able to put a framework around different problems, come up with different solutions, it just really fascinated me. And I realized I only think in dollars and cents. I never think about the bigger picture. So that ultimately was why I decided to go to consulting. I went to the University of Michigan for business school. I actually just graduated in May and currently at BCG in the Philadelphia office. And I started in December. So I don't have as much experience as Jesse and Felly. So I guess I give you the new joiner feel and what it's like to start during the pandemic.
Awesome. And I think that's a good example of a lot of the students I talk to think that they have to go into the field they're going to be in right away out of school, but kind of finding your way can be really valuable, and seeing what you don't like or what you are attracted to is an awesome experience. So that's perfect. We got a ton of questions submitted beforehand, and they're all kind of grouped into different buckets. So I think the first one that we can start with is what are the key steps we should be taking in our undergraduate to be successful in consulting? And maybe Junior, if you want to start with that one.
Sure. So I would say, at least from what I've heard from folks who have gone into consulting out of undergrad, and to be 100% frank, I actually never knew what a consulting firm when I was in undergrad. I didn't learn about them until actually my first job at Goldman. So networking is a big piece of it. From what I've been seeing from a lot of folks, just talking to folks about the job, talking to folks about your interests. It's a really big thing. Getting to know the folks in the office you want to work at is actually very important, because a lot of consulting firms do office specific recruiting, although it starts in a generalist level, but by the time you get to the final round, it gets into specifically your office. So having an advocate in there is really important. And outside of networking is just getting to know the case study method is really important. So how to case and practicing that is also super important. And for those who still have a summer left or a couple summers before your final year, if you don't get a chance to do an internship at a consulting firm, get an internship either in any type of firm where you could talk about why the skills you're bringing to the consulting field is also really important as well. So doing something active during the summer, that doesn't mean getting a corporate internship. You can go work at your local small business or volunteer, just trying to get those key skills that you think you can actually validate, and then talk about that during your informational interviews.
So, Jesse or Felly, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll add kind of two things. I think we can talk more about the specifics of the interview process. I'm sure that a lot of those questions have to do with that. But I think, at the end of the day, they go through a lot of resumes. So just making sure you keep your grades up, I think that's really critical. It is unfortunately one of the filters they use. I think having those relationships and networking is also really important. But if you don't get a big chance to do that, that is unfortunately something they look at. So to extent possible, just making sure, you keep your grades up. I think that's focus on school more than getting on the job, I would say. But I think that's a really big one. That is just, I think I wouldn't be being honest with you guys if I said it didn't matter.
I agree with Junior and Felly. The only thing I'd add is life happens. So if there's something in your life that prevented you from getting the grades that you need in a certain semester, take the GRE or the GMAT, because that is another quantitative indicator, like Felly said, rightly or wrongly, but you can say, okay, my GPA wasn't great, but look, I crushed the GRE. So clearly I'm capable. Please hire me.
Awesome. I like that kind of alternative route to show the confidence.
Say, I don't know, for some of the guys starting off, my GPA was not very great my freshman and sophomore years, and realized junior year kind of mattered. So I worked really hard my junior and senior year, got my GPA up, but I also on my resume showed both. And people really and appreciate that, because not everyone knows day one that they the GPAs are as important as they are. I had no idea. So just because you didn't get off to the best start doesn't mean you can't make up for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we do have a lot of freshmen and sophomores here, and we do have some juniors and seniors. But Junior, you had mentioned kind of getting the right skills, whether it's not specifically through consulting, but there were a couple of the questions were, what are those skills and like how do we highlight them, and what are the transferable skills that on a resume really shine through that are applicable to consulting?
Very good question. Still trying to figure out what all the right skills are. I'm 2 months in, but I think that you just got to think about like what a consultant do is what are they paying you for? They're paying you to think at the end of the day. Like that's really what we're bringing to the table, our intellectual capacity. Funny joke, my brother-in-law asked my wife what to get me for Christmas last year. And she was like, oh, the only like what tools to get me for Christmas? She was like, the only tool you need is his brain. He doesn't need a hammer. Like he's okay. So like just always think about like it's always being inquisitive, asking questions. I think when you talk about like things to put on your resume, you always want to have results-driven bullets. So not talk about what you did, but the outcome of it, and most importantly, how you what part did you play in that outcome? Were you the leader in the team? Were you someone who provided a support function? Because in consulting, you'll be doing all of those throughout your career. So I think those are like the biggest things in terms of the skills. Just always think outcome-driven. It doesn't have to be made $1 million, but it just always think, what are the outcome and what role did I play? Most importantly, what did I learn from it? Because when you do the behavioral interview part, that's what it's going to really be about. What did you learn from this experience?
And I want to add to what Junior said, the specific skills, meaning, do I need a certain internship? Do I need a certain class? I want to emphasize what Junior said in that it doesn't really matter. It more matters how you demonstrate what you achieved. I had only had experience in public education and community organizing before I joined Bain, and my GPA wasn't great. But every single bullet on my resume was accomplished X as shown by Y by doing Z. And that's something that Laszlo Bach, who was the former chief people officer at Google, talked about. But it's exactly what Junior just said. Showing the results of everything that you did and how you did it is really important and really speaks to recruiters.
I love that. And I would say pretty applicable for most roles is it's really useful if you look at the job description of the roles you're applying for and kind of look at the language that the recruiter is using and maybe mirror some of that language within your resume, because it's really telling you the skills that they're looking for and using the language that they're looking for. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. This is more towards, I guess, Feli, you had mentioned earlier, you expected a lot of specific interview questions and a lot of them were just kind of general, but like, is there something we should do to prepare for case interviews? Or like, what is the most important thing we should be doing in a case interview where afterwards we're going to make a great impression?
I have a lot of opinions and thoughts. Jesse and Junior might disagree. But I think at the end of the day, like the people that are interviewing you, it's not their full-time job. It's consultants actually. So they get given instructions on how to evaluate people. And as much as it shouldn't be like this, it is, but it is sort of an equation. So the more you practice, frankly, the better off you are. And I'm not saying you need to do 100 cases. That's not true. But like there is power in volume, and one day it just clicks. And I don't know when it'll happen for you guys, but one day it was just suddenly like, huh, this makes sense. And frankly, it's a formula. Just like it's a formula on your resume, what it should look like, and there's certain expectations, it's the same thing for case interviews. So getting familiar with that kind of structure is really important, and then just practicing it. And we can talk about the structure if you guys want here, but also like there's so many books that have been written about it, and I'm happy to offline send a list of what I think are the best ones. But there's books, read the book, and then just practice, practice, practice.
Feli also got offers at all 3 of the big 3, so we should listen to her.
Nice.
Still intense.
But yeah, but like I did 30 live practice interviews. I was like pretty maniacal about it as well.
Yeah, reps are like, just to co-sign everything Jesse and Felix said, reps are super important. And it's literally a muscle you're building with case interviews. And the more reps you do, the stronger that muscle gets, because there's probably only like 4 or 5 type of cases you're going to get. And it's a beautiful thing when they start the case and you're just like, this is a revenue case. Like I already know what type of frame I'm going to think about using and where I'm going to pull out of it. But if you don't do those reps, you won't catch it. So it's super important. And things like fast math is like practicing those is very, very important. It makes life a lot easier for you as well.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'll add, this could be hearsay, but my understanding is at the undergraduate level, it's market sizing are one of the big ones that they ask you about. So practice those in particular. But don't over-index because I could be wrong.
Awesome. Sorry, one thing about market sizing that I think is really cool, I think it's one of the only case exercises that you can do by yourself. All of the other case practice, you need a partner. You need somebody to like ask you the questions to drive it forward, but you can just like do market sizing. Like, it's not that it's fun, but like in the shower, you can think about like how many shower heads are in this dorm building or whatever, wherever you're living at the time.
Love that one. And we do have a lot of professionals on Odyssey who are in their bio. They mentioned they're happy to help you with case interviews. And one of the things we're working on is to kind of provide the material to help you do that. So it's just something to keep in mind. We do have a question from Megan. You can go ahead and ask it on mute.
I think just to like follow up, what should you do if you get stuck? Like you just don't know what to do. You don't know how to answer. Like obviously don't sit there in silence, but what should I do?
I have two suggestions. The first is it's okay to pause. I think that our nerves I am guilty of this. I speak really quickly. I am blah, 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 blah. Sometimes just like taking an inhale and thinking for a moment does not come across as being an awkward silence to an interviewer. That's number one. Number two, if you're really stuck after taking a breath, you can say, okay, this is just talk out loud, like what you're thinking. And so just say, okay, I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z, and I'm not sure if I should go with option A or option B. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think option A makes more sense. And then you just go. And 9 times out of 10, it'll unravel for you that way.
Yeah, I completely agree with Justy there. I mean, it happens in the team room when you're working on a case all the time. Like, you're like, wait, what am I doing? And when you're in those real life situations, what you do is you pause, you don't freak out, and then you're like, okay, what am I trying to solve? Like, what is the question? Like, go back to the beginning and be like, okay, I'm trying to solve this. This is what I've done. Okay, this is okay. It's just going through the process again and talking it out loud. You'll get there. And honestly, this is the type of situations where you'll demonstrate how you'll act in a team room. And like, again, it happens all the time. So not losing your confidence is the real key there.
Confidence is key. I think the key part to the case, in my opinion, is confidence, because at least from everyone I spoke to, they haven't come across one person who had a perfect case, or like someone made a mistake somewhere in the process in the case. But it's how you bounce back from it. And if you seem teachable is what's really important. So when you get super flustered and you realize, oh man, like I made this one mistake 10 minutes into the case, the entire case is done. Like, that's not true. You have like a lot of leeway to bounce back. And the person's really looking for like, how coachable are you? And remember in the beginning, they're paying you for how you think, right? So they want to know how you think. At the end of the day, you might be going down the wrong way, but a lot of times, well, almost all of the time, the person on the other side of the table is here to help you. So when you say, hey, I think we should start looking at this, they'll be like, well, have you thought about this other side of it? And they're here to help you. They're not here to like badger you all the time. Like, they're not the enemy. So think of them like as like a mentor on the other side of the table. That's just, as you're thinking through different solutions, they're either giving you a check mark or help guiding you down the right road. So when you do get flustered, always just think out loud.
I think that's super empowering, right? That it's not getting stuck doesn't matter. It's just how you handle it. So it's like, expect to get stuck because everybody does, but just don't worry too much about it and get in your own head. Awesome. We had a kind of cluster of questions. I guess this is relevant for Jesse because they're all about how to start in consulting when you don't have business or finance experience, or you're a non-business major. Or a non-traditional business major. One of them was in public health, and you had mentioned how you had kind of the Teach for America, how you use that experience, and I think it'd be helpful to just talk a little bit more about how even if you're not from that traditional background in terms of the major, you can still get into consulting.
Sure. I am going to have to agree with Junior in terms of networking. I think that my networking is what got me the interviews. I did get interviews at all of the firms, but I was pretty adamant. I did not get offers at all the firms. But I did get interviews, and I was pretty adamant about reaching out to, I knew I wanted to be in Los Angeles. So I reached out to the recruiter in every office and I introduced myself, and it wasn't generic either. I was very specific. I am a teacher. I want to do Bain. I want to come to Bain for these reasons. I don't have long-term aspirations to stay at Bain. I want to take what I learn and make a difference somewhere else. At that time, the story I told you is a bit polished. It's not actually true. I thought I wanted to like run a charter school, and now I don't even believe in charter schools. So, people change, and that's fine. I reached out to, I still remember her, Ashley Ray. She was the recruiter in the LA office for Bain. And I said, is there anyone who did TFA in the office that I could talk to? So I instantly tried to make a connection based on a shared experience and a shared interest that I have. And then something else, because Odyssey is geared towards underrepresented people, if you're comfortable talking about any elements of your identity, I think that's total fair play to reach out to a recruiter and talk about. I want to talk about what it's like to be a fill in the blank person at this firm, because odds are you're not going to be part of the dominant culture at that firm. And that's a completely reasonable thing to reach out to. If you're not comfortable talking about that, then don't talk about you are interested in whatever you're interested in. And that's as long as it's not, basketball. If there's a legitimate interest that's related to the business or that's related to what they're working towards, reach out and ask to speak to somebody in that office that shares either that identity or that interest with you. And that's what I did. And also alumni networks, especially if you're not from, this is a whole other conversation, but if you're not from a target school. So I had, I mentioned, the privilege of the college I went to. Because I went to Penn, I could apply anywhere. That school checks a box for people. And a lot of my friends who were successful in the process that didn't come from target schools also had to rely heavily on networking. And you can even say, is there somebody that's an alum of my school in your office? Or even better, find the alum of your school in the office that you want to work at through your alumni database, and send them an email and explain who you are and ask them, tell me about what it was like to go from whichever school you're at to the firm they're at now.
Junior or Felly, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add two things. One, your undergrad major does not matter.
That's true.
So don't stress about that. That shouldn't be an issue. The other thing is, while connecting to someone, if you really get gung-ho about being in one particular office, I agree with Jesse, you should try to identify people in that office. And this is more specific to McKinsey, but at McKinsey, we're moving away from offices. They don't even have to be in your office. Anyone in North America, the US, let's call it.
That's a good point and a good distinction about how the firms, even though the work we do is very similar, we are a little bit different in our model. I don't doubt that eventually we'll probably move away from the office model too, but we're not close to there yet, I think.
I'm actually helping a friend right now interview for a lateral role at McKinsey, actually. And she comes from an education background, been in education for about 6-7 years. So when it comes to business, it's just second nature to her. It's not second nature to her at all. So one thing that she does a lot is she listens to business podcasts. So the Wall Street Journal's Money Briefing Daily. Robinhood has a podcast called Market Snacks that was actually founded by Wharton and Ross alum. So she listens to those to get a sense of business news and different ways businesses are solving their problems, and leverage those while she starts the case. Because there was someone who was a psych major undergrad, worked in education nonprofit for the last in the policy space for the last 6-7 years. So at least getting more comfortable with business terminology and business lingo. But I'll say for the folks who are who are in undergrad, that's not what you have to worry about, honestly. Maybe if you're trying to come in a lateral position, but if you're in undergrad, they're not taking your major that much into consideration. Once again, they're just trying to figure out, what did you learn? What do you enjoy doing? That's what they're really focused on.
Awesome. And I'm glad Jesse made that distinction or mentioned how this is also very applicable for non-target schools. And that was one of the other questions we had. And I think coming back to what Junior first mentioned and Jesse reiterated on networking is just super important. And one thing you should keep in mind is that we have professionals from all three of these firms on Odyssey with open slots right now. And a lot of people are kind of hesitant or nervous about booking their first office hour. And I don't totally understand that, but I think it's really empowering once you do that and just like take the jump and talk for 30 minutes. It's a really low risk situation for you. It's not an interview. It's just getting to know somebody at the firm, and they're on here because they want to lend a helping hand. So once you start getting those reps in, it's very similar to doing the casing, and like the reps really make a difference. And all of a sudden you're more comfortable talking and you can kind of learn more and kind of get more out of the experience. So I definitely would encourage you all to get more involved in that.
If you have booked an office hour, can you give us a little emoji?
I love that.
So no one has?
So you all have
One
to.
person. One person. Two people.
Two.
Okay.
There's definitely more in here. We're at 3. I see some names that have definitely booked a couple.
Okay. I don't want to put you, they get filled so quickly. Okay.
Well, you can
We
all
have
LinkedIn message me, and I can't promise I'll get to it in the next week because I just started a new job. But I promise, pledge here, I will talk to every single one of you here. I will talk to you. So just email me.
Thank you, Felly. I appreciate that. And for they get booked so quickly, we're working on different systems so everybody doesn't get the recommendations at the same time, and that's sometimes what happens. But even I'm just looking at this week, we have tomorrow a senior analyst at McKinsey. The 13th, we have an associate at McKinsey, and then Jesse's got slots on the 16th open. So we definitely have stuff open this week, and then more out a couple of weeks. So I definitely would recommend even not just looking at the email recommendation you get each week, but then just checking out on the site and kind of scrolling through or clicking on consulting, and you can see what's available, and you might have better luck. So.
My next question is let's do the emoji thing again. Who has a sense for what an informational interview looks like, or who feels comfortable talking to like one of us? If you met Junior, Felly, or me for coffee, who feels comfortable like leading that conversation? Awesome. I don't want to put you on the spot, and I don't want to hijack this from Brian, but as you can tell, I was an educator. Who does anyone want to share like any tips to get some other people talking? Otherwise, I think Junior, Felly, and I can talk about what we find valuable when we talk to young people, because we're old now.
That's real.
Well, I can say something. My favorite question to ask is, what does a typical day look like? Because you kind of get them talking, and then also you learn so much from just them walking through your day.
Love that one.
And I generally look at their LinkedIn profile and see if there is any mutual interest, and I start off the conversation from there. I had a chat with Jesse. That was lovely.
Awesome.
I definitely like asking people about their journey and how each experience like led to another and how it's like reshaped their goals and stuff. And that's really interesting.
I love that.
I don't know if you noticed the trend with the 3 like pointers the folks gave is ask people about themselves. And that's one thing I learned in undergrad. So like I went to a non-target undergrad, so I had to network my butt off to get into like a place like Goldman. And some people you just walk in a room, like, oh, tell me how'd you get into this company? And it was like 30 minutes later, they're still talking. I actually had so for the internship, I interned at another consultant firm over the summer, EY Parthenon, and my final round was with a partner. And I just asked him one question about like how like Parthenon is like developing their digital space. And he spoke for like 45 minutes. And then the interview was over. He goes, man, this was a great chat. I was like, yeah, it was amazing. Thanks. Like, I got the offer. So like ask people about themselves. Like if you don't know where to start, just ask people about themselves. Like what made you like this company? What made you like this industry? How'd you get here? People love talking about themselves, so give them that opportunity too.
That's awesome. It's such a great point, and it's a common thread. Okay, we did have one other cluster of questions. Not to change the subject. I love going on this, but I just want to make sure we hit this kind of cluster, and they're all kind of around what are the characteristics that make a successful employee, good versus great analyst. How does that come through in the applications? And I know we kind of touched on it where it's unique and I think this might even be a good time to highlight kind of the differences at each of the firms, because maybe that is a different description, whether you're at Bain, BCG, or McKinsey, and that could kind of help the students get a sense for the difference in the cultures too.
I can start if you want. I think what makes at the junior level, what makes someone a good employee is someone, we've alluded to this before, that's curious and eager to learn and open to like feedback. So someone that you can really coach is what people look for. So I think, you know, something, I don't want to say on a resume, but in an interview that comes through is like people's excitement, and like people are just naturally attracted to people that are excited about the job and want to be there. So trying to bring as much of that excitement as you can. The other thing is like you spend, not in COVID times, but you spend so much time with these people that like people want someone that they imagine having to like sit in a team room with for like endless hours. So the more you can be yourself, because nobody likes a canned person that comes off as a robot. Like they want someone that's like real, interesting, and frankly, if you act like yourself in an interview and they like don't like that, then you don't want to work there. Like I think that I like definitely did this as an undergrad. Like I was being interviewed and I was like putting on a face, and then I hated my first job in undergrad and I was miserable. So I think bringing yourself is really important. And culture at McKinsey. McKinsey's a very big place. And that means that you get some really shitty people and then some really awesome people. And it just varies. And we have there's things that are common across people, and there's McKinsey-isms and all that. But at the end of the day, I can't say there's one big culture. I know there's been a lot of bad press about McKinsey lately, and like I'm horrified by it, frankly. And most people in McKinsey were horrified by it. But that still happened because it's a really big place. So my takeaway of this is like a place like McKinsey, you'll find your niche and you'll find your people. And like, you know, one of the hardest things about leaving McKinsey was leaving the people. And like, that's why I say, and people said that to me, I was like, that's so cliche. But actually it was. Like some of my best friends are my coworkers. Like I still, actually the head of the innovation practice is like my biggest mentor now. Like I had a coffee with him last week. I called him like the other day to ask him about a job, like something about my current job. Like these people do become your friends, your supporters, your mentors, and you will find those people no matter what.
Awesome. I love that answer. Junior, do you want to go next?
So you got to remind me of the question. My fans are talking very loud, so like I have to mute myself.
If you want, I can jump in, and then and then you can go after me. It was what makes a really good employee, and then what are the differences between Bain, BCG, and McKinsey. So obviously I've only worked at Bain. I can only speak to Bain, but I'll start where Feli did by co-signing everything she said about being curious, being eager. And I would add something else about, it's exactly what Feli said, just said differently, but like your attitude. So it's, and it doesn't mean you can't be in a bad mood. It doesn't mean that you can't think like work sucks sometimes, because it does suck sometimes, but it's like, okay, you know, you have to do this like really annoying data clean of this like really messy data, and it's gonna take all night. Okay, that sucks, but let's do it. Like you have a smile. And so it's not about, you know, you don't have, again, you're not like a robot, but you are, you keep it real, but you also are like always doing it to keep the team moving forward. And like, it's just like nobody likes somebody who complains. So I would say that like the analysts that I worked with that were the most difficult were the ones who were resistant to feedback, that like to the point that Junior and Feli talked about already, being teachable and being coachable and like being willing to learn, or the ones who felt that like certain work was beneath them. And we all do work that's beneath us sometimes. Like that's just like part of being on a team. Like we all have to pitch in. Obviously there are times where if it's a pattern, I'm not trying to dismiss all of the other ways and like problematic ways that our identities come into messed up things we do at work, and that's unacceptable. But like the fact that someone sometimes is going to have to do like the crappy data cleaning that nobody wants to do. That's just part of being on the team. And so being really optimistic. What I loved about Bain is, so Bain is much smaller. It's the smallest of the three. It's also the youngest of the three. It's also going through growing pains right now. I think honestly, all companies are. This has been a traumatic and humongous shift. But the reason I joined Bain is that its model is centered around home offices, which is exactly what McKinsey's moving away from. And I think it's definitely going to be harder from a strategic perspective, given the changing nature of work and the increased expertise that's going to be necessary to consult properly and appropriately. However, as an employee, I loved that this giant firm with 11,000 people, I knew like a couple hundred people really well. And like to Belly's point, my best friend, I have a group of like really close friends. Belly knows all of them. And I met them all through Bain. Like they are my best friends in the world. I talk to them every single day, and I met them at Bain. And in terms of my mentors, as I'm going through all of these like career changes, I have partners at Bain that I text, and I'm just like, hey, just so you know, like this is like I have this interview, like I'm scared, what should I do? And they text me back right away. So yeah.
Cool. All right, got the question now. But it definitely goes on everything Jesse and Felly said about just being coachable, having a good attitude. I'll say the only thing I'll probably add is be a bit proactive. Like that's also like really important, and that's really how you stand out from the bunch. Just like one good example, one bad example. So over the summer when I was at my last consulting firm working on a project with an analyst who's actually a summer analyst, and we'll get into calls, and I was like, okay, I'm leading the call. And as I'm leading the call, I'm like, hey, are you taking notes? He goes, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to take notes. I was like, oh, like, I mean, how are we supposed to remember what just happened in this hour-long call? Like, so just being the proactive part, like I'm working right now with some of my first case right now, working with an associate who's I think a year and a half out of Penn undergrad. And as we finish one module, she's already saying, hey, like, I'm going to start looking into X, Y, and Z so we can see how we can approach this for the client. I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, that was like 2 weeks on my list, but if you want to start it up now, go ahead. So like having that, being that proactive part is actually really, really important. Because I've only worked at BCG for only 2 months, and I only got an offer from BCG. So I can't talk to McKinsey and Bain, but I think one thing that I really liked about here is my goal long-term is to do a lot of social impact oriented work. And when I was just looking for consulting firms that focus on that, so a lot of growing projects at BCG, specifically in the education practice, so that really interests me. Only BCG and McKinsey have a Philly office. My fiance and I wanted to move to Philly after business school, so that kind of like focused on one of those two firms. And the people have been super nice so far, super open to speaking to me. Haven't met any best friends yet. Well, 2 months in, so give me a year or so. But I would say one thing I'm really big on is feedback. Like I came from like my past firms were really big feedback cultures, and I see that here at BCG. I actually have like a feedback session in a couple hours with my manager. So like, and this has been very candid feedback, very open feedback, many different processes of getting it. So I feel like they're training you to be really good here, and they're kind of giving you the opportunity to succeed. So that's something I really like. And back to the people, when I was interviewing, I realized I was casing a lot with people I knew. So therefore, I was comfortable making mistakes. It was just a comfortable interview. So I was like, I got to start talking to people I have no idea who they are. So I went on LinkedIn and this other platform called, sorry, I forgot the name of it. It just escaped me, but it's like a LinkedIn for people of color. And I just started like emailing BCG people. And my interview was on Friday. I emailed them on Tuesday. I think like 4 out of the 5 people I pinged emailed me back like that same Tuesday, say, hey, let's get on the phone Wednesday and Thursday the case. And I was able to do that. And it was just no holds barred. I didn't know me from a hole in the wall. Just an email saying, hey, I got this interview with BCG coming up on Friday. Would you mind like casing me for half an hour? And those same people, after I got the offer, sent me an email like, hey, let's like catch up on a quarterly basis just to see how things are going for you. So I feel like it's a place I could really build a lot of mentors here.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
I have 2 things that I thought of that I want to say about like being successful in the role. I think one thing is at first you should over communicate. So like send lots of emails. They don't read it, they don't have to, but just being like, this is what I've done. This is what I'm going to do next. It's always good. They'll check it. They'll know that you're on the right page. So over communicate. Second question, which has a second thing, which has a caveat. Ask questions if you don't know, but, and this is a really important but, because people hate it when you pester them with too many questions. Every time you ask a question, say, I have this question. I did all this on my own to try and figure it out. And now I'm asking you. And don't go crazy and like, you know, spend 7 hours. That's the whole point of asking questions, to avoid demonstrate that you tried it yourself. Like the worst thing you can do is ask a question and the person's like, Google it. Like you want to avoid that. Like do the bare minimum on that, and then you'll impress people.
Yeah, my significant other like gave his team ducks to put on their computers, and he would like to make it like a funny thing. And he was like, first ask the duck, and then you can ask me, or you can ask like your supervisor or whoever. But like the idea is exactly like Feli said, just Google it first. Like spend at least 15 minutes trying to figure it out. This is one of the downsides of not being in an office. But like also ask a peer before you ask up. But it's always okay to ask up. Just make sure, like Feli said, you're Googling it.
And for people that are a little bit more tenured, like it's always good to over communicate, but as you get older, you need to start moving a little bit away from that, because if not, that's how you establish your credibility a little bit more, by like not having to like outline every single thing you do. But when you're first starting, like it's actually very helpful for your managers, and it's good because you get alignment on what you're doing, but just also caveat there.
I like the common thread with the curious, eager to learn, coachable, communicate well. I think it all kind of ties together, and those are all traits that you can definitely show in your application and in the interviews. So I think they're definitely all very important. We're hitting the 45-minute mark, so we're going to have to wrap it up. But I just want to really thank the 3 panelists again. This has been awesome. It's been super helpful. Thank you, Jesse, Feli, and Junior, for your time. And thank you all the students that showed up. Please, it's super important. We're going to send out a post event survey. It's 2 or 3 questions. It'll take 1 minute. Please fill it out. It helps us have more events like this so we can know how to help you better. And we want to keep doing more and bringing you more content. So definitely fill that out if you get a chance. And also we're going to have a link for the recording in that email. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to connect with these professionals, a couple have office hours. Feli had mentioned you can connect with her on LinkedIn, but just reach out to me if you're having trouble connecting or if you need more help. And if you have any follow-up questions, definitely help point you in the right direction. So thanks again, and thank you all.
Really quick, I'm really bad at doing office hours. So you can always just send me a message, connect on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to chat. I always forget to do it when I say I'm going to do it, and then things come up. So like just like reach out. And it's good practice to just cold email people. I think it was Feli who said, you're probably going to get a lot of no's, not even no's, a lot of ignores, but just keep going. Like, don't let it get you down.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right, well, good luck, everyone.
And never be like, don't be shy to ask for help. I like always randomly cold call, email, and people always like, not always, but like people do respond, and the people that don't respond don't care. They just ignored it. They moved on. They didn't think twice about it. And also not only take advantage of office hours, but like I'm sure your schools have like career offices that can like read your resumes. There's a lot of help out there. Like seek it out, because like you best believe that everyone else is doing it too, and they just might not be telling it to your face, but everyone's getting help, and like you're at a disadvantage if you don't seek it out.
Cool. Thank you all, and have a great Thursday, and thanks again. And I love the ending note there.
Feli and I talk about work all the time. Still to this day. Bye.
Nice.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one.